Welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. What are you supposed to do when nothing is going right? How are you supposed to manage? There was actually an ad in South Africa where I'm from for Toyota. Their little jingle for Toyota was everything. I'm not a good singer, so I'm not going to try to destroy the tune, but it goes like, everything keeps going right, Toyota. That was their model, which actually is interesting, because the Toyota supposedly breaks down a little less than its peers. But what do you do when your life is cracking, when it seems like the darkness is descending all around you? How are you supposed to manage? Where can you find your faith? Can you relate to this? Can you relate to a life that's not perfect? That seems to be where you're mourning your dreams. Painful, right? So our Torah portion this week gives us tremendous insight when we look at the very, very closing words on page 597. The very last words of the book of Exodus. The second half of the book of Exodus is all about construction. It's a building project, it's a building campaign, fundraising and the whole thing, engineering plans, architectural, interior design. You got the Home Depot run. You got it all in the second half of the Torah portion of the book of Exodus. It's all about the Jewish people building a shul in the desert, right? How many Jews does it take to change a light bulb? I don't know. There's got to be a joke to that one, right? Right. So I can only imagine what it was like having all these Jews working together on a building project. It sounds like the opening of a joke, right? But at the very, very end of the construction, here's what happens. Let's take a look on page 597. The cloud covered the tent of meeting. Verse 34. And the glory of God filled the tabernacle. That's great, right? Looking good. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting since the cloud had rested on it, and God's glory filled the tabernacle. Whenever the cloud, now that's great. So far, so good, right? They built the house. God moved in. Sounds great, right? I mean, this is an epic achievement for mankind to have created a home for God Almighty. Sounds great. But now suddenly there's a total pivot. You'd think that the book of Exodus should have ended right there. But no, there's a new topic that comes out. And this new topic is all about travel itineraries. The tabernacle remained in place. Whenever the cloud rose from above the tabernacle, the Israelites would embark on all their journeys. If the cloud did not rise, they would not set out until the day it rose. So the sign of when they would have to embark on the mission, they were 40 years in the desert. So when the cloud arose from the temple, that's when they knew it was time to go. But as long as the cloud was settled, there was still time to stay. For the cloud of God was above the tabernacle by day, and fire would be there by night, visible to the entire house of Israel, at all their journeys. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. This concludes the book of Exodus. So here we are. We're finishing the book of Exodus, which is called the book of redemption, as it tells the story of the Jewish people leaving slavery in Egypt. And as we finish the story of the construction of the tabernacle and the revelation of God's presence in it, suddenly we reach this rule of traveling. It's got nothing to do with anything. That they would travel in the desert. I mean, we weren't even talking about traveling in the desert for the past half a book. And suddenly we're like, oops, by the way, when they were traveling, it depended on the cloud. So we have two questions. What's the connection between how they traveled and the construction of the tabernacle? This law should have been more applicable. This rule, this verse should have been in the book of Bamidbar in the desert, which is called the book of Numbers. I don't know why, but it's the book of in the desert, the fourth book of the Torah, which talks about all their travels. Over there, it should have said when the cloud was up, when the cloud was down. If the cloud was up, they traveled. If the cloud was down, they stayed. I mean, what's it going to do with anything? It just comes out of nowhere. We're like, what? Where did that even come from? Besides, why is it that they traveled when the divine presence departed? I mean, that's kind of weird, right? Don't you want to have God with you when you travel? Like you need the cloud to dwell. That when the cloud dwells, that's when you travel. Why is it that when the cloud leaves, when the divine presence departs, now we move? Okay, but you wanted to be with them. From this verse, I mean, you're throwing in there a totally different angle there. You're saying that there's a cloud in front of them, there's a cloud above them. It doesn't say that here. It doesn't say that. Here it just says, when the cloud departed, the presence of God was in the tabernacle that they built. This was great. The God had blessed their handiwork. Amazing. But when God left their handiwork, that's when they traveled. That's what it says in the verse.
Yeah, but because in order to, they had to take the tabernacle apart. So if the Shekhinah was in
But
there,
they didn't do that until the cloud first departed.
It had to depart in order to take it apart, because if they went in, they would have died if the cloud was still
Okay,
in
so
there.
Toby's saying a practical observation that when they traveled, they needed to disassemble the tabernacle, but they couldn't do that if the presence of God was there. It's kind of rude. The God is inside the palace. You can start disassembling the house. Can't do that. So that's interesting. Very interesting logistical detail there. Very nice. Very nice. But let's get a little more spiritual. Very, very spiritual about what to do when God seems to be departing from your life. How to handle it when the presence of God is there. It's great. When you feel like God is in your business, clients are happy, deals are being closed on time, right? Cash is flowing. It's good. Employees are happy. The boss is happy. It's great. But when God departs, it's total chaos. Nobody's happy. Everybody's miserable. The banks are pressing. What do you do? Right? So how do you handle it when the divine presence leaves us? And God forbid in our families. Can you imagine what happens when the divine presence leaves our families? What that could look like, right? Comes over here the answer in the Torah tells us like this: that what is the ultimate purpose of it all? What is the purpose of the construction of the tabernacle? What is the purpose of the creation in general?
To make a home on earth for God.
Exactly. The whole purpose is to make on this earth a home for God. But what does that mean to make it on this earth? Why on this earth and why not in heaven? Why would we be making a home for God?
Well, he has a home in heaven.
Okay, so fine. So he has a home in heaven, but he doesn't have a home in this earth.
Right.
What does that mean? Why would he not have a home in this earth? What is this earth? How does this earth different from heaven?
So it's physical.
Okay, so what's the difference?
It's within us.
What's the difference between this earth and everywhere else?
We don't want Hashem to be a snowbird.
We don't want Hashem to be a snowbird. We want it to be everywhere, right? Okay. The difference between this earth, this world, and every other world is that this world is spiritually dark. That's the difference. This world is called Tachtonim, the lowest of the worlds. That God desired, like in today's Tanya, God desired to have a dwelling place a home where? In the lowest worlds. That's what God wanted a dwelling place. What makes this world the lowest worlds? Because here the lights are out, spiritually speaking. Here there is no spiritual sensitivity. Here there's no godly awareness. You bump into an angel. You ask an angel Gabriel. You say, Gabriel, what's up? How's the boss doing today? Right? And he'll tell you, God's in a good mood. God is feeling a little in a happy mood. They're cracking jokes. They're making him, Gabriel will tell you about God. But you ask a human being on PGA Boulevard, how's the boss today? He doesn't even know who you're talking about. He thinks the boss is maybe, I don't know, the President of the United States. He thinks the boss is the guy in charge of his country club. His wife. He doesn't even know who the boss is. He's like, oh, you're talking about God? God? I haven't thought about God in 46 years. He's not even in that world, right? That's what happens in this world. This world is a place where the lights are out, spiritually speaking. That's what makes this world the most interesting novelty for God, to be recognized as king, to have a home in this world. What's so exciting about it is that it's not a foregone conclusion that God is recognized as king over here. The point is that our goal is to infuse holiness into places where holiness is not present, right? Now, as long as the divine presence is down in this world, as long as the cloud is resting upon us, if the cloud of God is resting upon us, then what's the problem? We're not the lowest world. When the divine presence, when the cloud of God is resting on my house, in the work of my hands, when things are flowing amazingly well because God's speed is with me, we're not in the lowest world. We're not fulfilling the purpose of the Mishkan. We're supposed to illuminate the dark, not illuminate the light. Right? It's only when the cloud of God rises up and it's dark right here, now we're ready to travel. For which purpose? We're ready to begin to, to do what we have to do, which is to make this world a holy place. The whole purpose of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, this is not a separate topic from the tabernacle. The law of the rules of how they traveled is not a separate topic from the construction of the tabernacle. It's in fact the culmination of it. The whole purpose of the tabernacle, of this home for God that the Jewish people were building in the desert, was in order to give the Jewish people the power to be able to bring down the presence of God into this world. And that's the reason why the end of the book of Exodus is that when the cloud departed from them, that's when they traveled. That's when they pulled their sleeves up and put the pedal to the metal. Now the work begins. Because if you're living in a world which is perfect, you have absolutely no purpose. If you're living a life that has no challenges, what's the point? You
might as well be an angel.
You might as well be an angel. And angels, by the way, angels are factory line production. What do they call them, Henry Ford? The production lines. Assembly lines. Well, no, they're not assembly line workers. They're just mass produced. Angels, there's nothing special about an angel doing the right thing. Because angels don't have an evil inclination. They don't have the ability to face and overcome challenge. Ha, Jonathan. Powerful. Powerful. Angels are just, totally predictable. It's human beings that grapple with darkness. Jonathan, he says over here, I wish I could pick the challenges. Yeah. So many of us are fighting battles that are almost impossible. They're almost impossible to overcome. I was talking to a Jew on Friday. He's facing such a difficult test. I have to tell you, I did not know what to tell him. It's very unusual for me. I was rendered speechless. What was
the circumstance?
I can't talk about it.
Oh, okay.
I can't even tell you about it because that's how difficult it was. It was so difficult. And I'm looking at this guy, and all I could give him was a hug. All I could give him was empathy and to tell him that I feel your pain, man. I don't even have answers for you. I said, I'm going to try to work on it and see what I can do. But you look at this and I'm like, why? Why would God do this to him? Why would a person be stuck in difficult challenges? People are born with circumstances that are so hard. You know that a narcissist is an incurable condition. Narcissism. According to Ross Rosenberg of YouTube fame, he is big. I think his specialty is codependency. Actually, he coined the term. He doesn't like the word codependency. Codependency means that you're dependent on the You're dependent on the relationship, right? You're so addicted to the person that you enable their bad behavior. That's a codependent who's so dependent on the company that he's able to overlook the nasty behaviors or the addictive behaviors or the unhealthy behaviors of the other in order to perpetuate the relationship, right? So he translates it as SLD, calls it self-love deficiency. So the codependent is a person who's deficient in self-love, and that's why he's reliant on the other person to give him or her a sense of worth, a sense of value. So typically codependents will find narcissists to marry. So what happens if a codependent marries a narcissist? So now you got a person that's addicted to
A narcissist.
So the narcissist, all that he wants is to abuse the other person, right? That's what the narcissist does. I'm the center of attention, and I'm going to gaslight you to death, basically, right? Then comes the codependent who's addicted to that nasty behavior and lives a life of misery, just a life of absolute misery, because they cannot break free from the relationship. Why? Because they're so deficient in self-love that they'll do anything to get it from the other person, even if they're a narcissist. So this is just such a train wreck of a relationship. The narcissist or the codependent together, it's like a cocktail for a lifetime of misery. And they're both like addicted to each other in the most unhealthy way. Nobody's happy. It's a relationship of just convenience of sorts, but it's just totally messed up, right? So when you look at this relationship, for example, just a tiny little example of one like crazy impossibility. You know, if you have an employee who's a narcissist, there's a book called The Wizard of Oz and Other Narcissists. Amazing. The Wizard of Oz and Other Narcissists tells you like this. It says, if you have an employee or a boss who's a narcissist, you must quit. You have to fire them. There's nothing else you can do. You're going to fire them or quit, because otherwise you're gonna be miserable the rest of your life. But if you're married to one, they basically say you got to get out of the relationship. Problem is, if you're codependent, the book doesn't address that. Then you're addicted to the relationship. It's a different problem. You need to see a therapist or your rabbi. Okay, so where am I going with this? Is that people live with such tsaras. It's such a miserable life, and to the rest of the world, it looks perfect, because the narcissist has got to make superficial appearances. Very, very important. The superficial appearances. So to the rest of the world, nobody even knows. Their own family doesn't even know that they have these problems. They themselves don't even understand the problems, right? It's only when you have a life that's this dysfunctional. And I'm sorry to be, I'm truly not condoning God's behavior. I apologize if I sound like I am. But apparently, this is what God wanted. Apparently, what God wanted was that only in a dysfunctional life is where you're going to find your purpose. Because if your life was perfect, there'd be no purpose to it. And I sometimes look at people that are supposedly normal. And what's the opposite of neurodivergent, Keith? If neurodivergent means people that are not normal, then what's the opposite of that? Just normal? I guess that's called normal, right? Assuming that there is such a thing called normal. Yeah. Assuming that there's such a thing as normal. You look at two people. One is suffering with addictions from a wounded attachment in early childhood. It's anesthetizing the pain. And another person just normal. And you feel bad, like Jonathan's comment. I wish I could choose the challenges, right? But apparently you were thrown into a difficult situation, and you wish that you were like the normal person. But really, what we're learning from this line, what we're learning is it's comfort to the broken. The comfort is that if you're living a life that's normal, you're serving no purpose. In the words of the Torah, when the cloud was present, you had nowhere to go. But it was only when the cloud lifted, when the divine presence abandoned you. It's only when you were in a dysfunctional situation, only now are you able to begin your purpose, to begin your journeys. And that's what the Torah is telling us. It's very nice to build a tabernacle house for God, but that's nice. So you built it in this 150 by 75 foot space, which is the tabernacle. Great. Now you're ready. Now you're empowered to get this party started by lighting up the darkness. You want to know what darkness is? Put on your seatbelt, because God's got plenty darkness to introduce us to. And if God put you in that situation, I just want to say this to you, Jonathan. If God put you in that situation, it must be that you have the tools to overcome it. And I say the same thing to the narcissist and to the codependent. There actually is a cure for codependency. And according to Ross Rosenberg, it's learning to love himself. If the codependent is going to remain addicted to the other person, then his life is going to be miserable. But it's only when he learns to love himself, self-care, self-love, and by the way, that happens through davening. That happens through davening, through prayer. When you go to shul, you're not just like begging God for stuff. That's not what prayer is. Prayer is self-affirmation. It's self-validation. When you read the words and say, God, apparently you chose me to infuse your essence into me. OMG. Like, seriously, that's an OMG moment when you realize that out of all the creations, billions and trillions and gazillions of creations, apparently it was I, human being, little me, Jew, right, that God created, God chose to put his essence into me. And you're like, oh my God, then why would I need some schmo-bagel narcissist to give me a sense of validation if I can get that from God, right? So the codependent can be healed through prayer, through internal affirmation, self-love. The narcissist, wow. The narcissist is rough. The narcissist, in my opinion, can be cured. I'm sorry, I'm just on a roll here. I'm just going to get to you in a second. The narcissist, I believe, can be cured only by experiencing a paradigm shift, moving away from identifying with his animal soul, with his selfish animal soul. And somehow, I don't know if this is possible, but at least academically, if he were to reorient himself, or herself, to identifying with the animal soul, to identifying with the godly soul, because the godly soul is essentially selfless. If they were theoretically able to reorient their identification. Remember, I often say this, that, the name of a cemetery. The name of a cemetery in Hebrew has got two different names. It's either called the house of death or it's called the house of life. It's two different names. Why is it called two different names? The question is how you live your life. If you live your life emphasizing the body, then the cemetery is the house of death. If you live your life emphasizing the soul, then the cemetery is the house of life. And both are true. It just depends on how you view your reality. Same thing over here. If you live your life which is focused and identifying yourself on, orienting yourself on your animal soul, which is selfish, you can absolutely be a narcissist. But if you live your life, if you move that needle and you reorient to over to the godly soul, if you meditate and reflect and sing and daven and pray and whatever you need to do with the godly soul, and you bring enough about it, then that's going to bring you to an identification with your godly soul, which will hopefully divest of your need to destroy everybody else around you in order to build yourself up. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, you know how many narcissists it takes to change the light bulb? None. They use gaslighting. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. What was the question?
So is the level of our challenge, the magnitude of our test, in any way aligned with or related to our degree of separation from God? Meaning, I need a greater challenge because it is more difficult for you to make that change. Is it proportionate to your degree of darkness, if you will, personal darkness?
Is what proportionate to your degree of personal darkness?
The test that I'm giving you. I have one person gets a greater challenge than another person because it takes more of a slap across the face to wake you up and come out of your darkness. Yeah.
So King David tells us in the book of Psalms something very beautiful. He says, he speaks about those who go down to the sea on boats, those who flail in the waters. That's what King David says. I think it's like Psalm 108 or something. He says that. And it's like a verse that you don't really understand what he's talking about. But Chassidus explains what he's talking about. Chassidus explains that this world is a dangerous place. This world is a chaotic place. I mean, think about it. This is not the order of heaven. You're not in a world of angels. You're in a world of dangerous people and people that potentially want to hurt you, right? So in this world, it's like an ocean where you could easily drown. But there are those souls that were sent to this world in boats. There are souls that were sent down to this world in cruise ships where they don't even know that they're in a dangerous place. They're in a cruise ship. There's 3,500 people on the cruise ship. There's 8,000 servants and waiters and mechanics and engineers and people that are serving their needs. What?
Titanic.
I'm not talking about the Titanic, but you're talking about, I mean, people could be on a cruise ship and they wouldn't even know that they're in a dangerous place because they live lives that are really not that complicated and they don't have such great tests. Their marriages are relatively normal. I mean, at least from the outside, right? And they're making money and they got beautiful children and they seem to be functional. And then you have people that just are like, forget the cruise ship. They're not even in a rowboat. They don't even have a rowboat. They're just dumped in the water. They're just being dumped in the water and they're like, figure it out. How the heck are they holding on to a piece of driftwood? and they're hanging on for dear life for survival. They're running from one addiction to another addiction to another addiction, and they can't figure it out. Why is that, Chuck? I believe that the reason is two levels of answer. Number one, because God believes in the one. It's very painful, very, very painful. But God believes apparently in the one who's struggling more. Apparently he believes that the one who's struggling has the ability. I feel so bad saying this. It's so hard. But I academically believe that God believes that that person has the power far greater than the person who's living in the mansion with a lap of luxury, born into the trust fund, who doesn't have to worry for the rest of his life, right? By the way, let's be clear, people with trust funds have huge problems, right? Let's not assume that anybody lives in a mansion with 5 cars and 3 golf courses has a good life. Many people like that have no love, have no relationship with their children, no relationship with their spouses. They have no relationship with their spouses, right? Let's not assume that rich people somehow are living the good life, okay? Let's not assume that in any which way. And the second point I want to make is that what we're learning today is that when your life is caving in on you, and when your life is crumbling, and you're like, may I in Yahweh Ezri, from where will my help come? You just feel so lost and alone. Your cloud has departed. Now is time. Now is time for you to start traveling. Now is time for you to shake your leg, because this is the purpose, Jonathan. This is the purpose for what you've been sent down to this world. You weren't sent to this world in order to shine a light in the daylight. You were sent to this world to shine a light in the darkness. And there's a very, very powerful message here, guys. When we live in times of exile, when it's spiritually darker than ever before, then this is all the more reason why we should be engaging in Torah and mitzvahs. Never, ever be afraid of the dark. On the contrary, embrace the dark and understand that this is our purpose. How many people tell me, Rabbi, one day when my life will be perfect and I'll have nothing to worry about, that's when I'm going to go to shul. And I said, and that's not the point. Now you need to go to shul. How are you ever going to reach that point? No. Now I have to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now I have to be fully focused on my business in order to be able to survive. No, that's not actually true. In order to be able to survive, what you need to be doing is now you need to be going to shul. Now you need to be meditating in order to be able to survive the purpose of this world. And like Almighty Om says here, perfect is for museums. Not sure who said that. I love that point. You know what? You want to be perfect, you can be stuck behind a bulletproof glass. But if you're going to live a real life, then you're going to have to actually have the courage to get hurt. It's like love, relationships. Think about it. Think about this. Primates mate by exposing their most vulnerable parts to another. Think about that. As opposed to other animals that mate by turning their back on each other. Primates and humans mate by exposing their vulnerabilities to each other. Their vulnerable physical parts to each other. Because to love someone is to make yourself vulnerable to them. Is to allow a person outside of yourself the ability to hurt you in the deepest way. It's not easy, man. It's really, really rough stuff. But just like the abandonment of the divine presence from us in the desert was the signal to get moving, so too in our exile when life seems so chaotic and so dysfunctional. Now it's the time for us to shake a leg and to make a difference. Thank you.